It's May 2nd, 2024, and this is the Backdrop Weekly Developers Meeting. It's an exciting week here. Today is the Backdrop 128 preview release day. We're wrapping up the final touches on the preview release. And this meeting, we're going to recap everything that we managed to complete for 128 and talk about the follow-up items that are yet still to be done before the final release of Backdrop 128 in a couple weeks. So we'll start things off. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet. I'm core committer and technical lead for the Backdrop project. We've got a half dozen folks here today, and we'll go around and do some introductions just to let everybody introduce themselves. You can say, where you're from and what you're doing here. That would be great. We'll start with Greg, and then we'll go to Tim.
Hi, I'm Greg. I'm joining from Melbourne, Australia. Very excited about the things that we got in for the release. And we have another couple of weeks to polish things further and get bug fixes and UX fixes in. It's already looking like a really good release, and I'm excited. And I'm here because I want to help in any way that I can with the community. That's it.
Thanks, Greg. Tim, and then Justin. Oh, Tim, you're muted.
Yeah, that's better. I'm Tim Erickson. I'm St. Paul Tim on the internet. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota. Also very excited. A few weeks ago, the release was looking light, and now it's looking pretty heavy. A lot of things happened at the last minute, so really happy about that. It did just occur to me that one of the reasons some people may not be here today is that Stanford WebCamp is happening right now, and in fact, I think Laren either just gave or is giving a presentation like right at this time spot about the one that he did at Backdrop Live. So about Penn State or something. Anyways, it was a case study. So we may have some of our usuals participating in Stanford WebCamp. That's it. I'm done.
I think you're right. Thanks, Tim. Justin, and then Eli, if you're available.
I'm Justin Christopherson in Denver, Colorado. I help out with infrastructure as much as I can. Thanks.
Thanks, Justin. Eli, and then Andy.
Hello, my name is Eli. I'm a developer. I'm starting to work with Backdrop quite a bit. I'm in San Diego, California.
Thanks, Eli. Andy, if you're available.
I'm Andy, Doc Wilmot on the issue queues. Just like helping along the community. I'm just listening a bit today.
Only helping along.
Yeah, a bit of a modest statement there from Doc Wilmot, but thank you. Okay, so yeah, 128 is looking really great. We have a whole bucket of features that were completed. That yeah, it's looking like really fantastic. Starting things off is issue 2277, swappable config storage. This issue, now that it's completed, will allow site owners to decide if they want to store their active configuration, or actually their staging configuration too, but active configuration is the primary use case to store. Instead of using JSON files on disk, they can use their database to hold their configuration. This has some potential benefits on platforms that use like distributed file systems, where the file systems might not be very fast. The database could be a better option. Also, when using hosting platforms that have like backup capabilities and stuff like that, sometimes Backdrop's use of the file system gets a little bit confusing for them because they assume that a database restoration will back up everything related to a site's configuration. And in Backdrop, that's often not the case, especially since we encourage people to store their configuration outside of their files directory. That can make it so that hosting providers don't quite understand the concept of like needing to back up this arbitrary config directory in addition to the database. So storing your configuration in the database can alleviate those kinds of problems. For those curious, Hosif did some benchmarking on it, and his initial findings is that database driven config is slightly slower than file-based config, at least when the file-based config is on the same host and MySQL is on the same host. I imagine that the differences would be greater if it's going to vary actually. If it's a distributed file system, the file system's probably going to be slower. But if the database is over the network, the database will also be slower. So it really depends on your combination of what's local and what's distributed or remote or over the network. But for sites that are all together, like our target audience of being these smaller sites where there's likely one web server that is probably likely also the database server, file-based config is probably still slightly faster. So I don't think that there's going to be a strong motivator for people to switch from one to the other. But we are working on mechanisms to convert from one to the other. Right now, it's a decision that needs to be made at install time or managed in some other way, quote, some other way. We don't really have a tool yet to switch from one to the other, although I did hear that Joseph Flatt was working on something to make that possible.
Okay, can I clarify? Because I was about to ask that question, I think, which is, so there is no UI for this right now. You're saying it has to happen at install? And this is not something you can turn on or off or on in the settings.php on an existing site? No.
Not on an existing site.
No,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, but it's only accessible via settings.php, and right now it needs to be done at install time. But the tool that Joseph is working on, my understanding is that it's a module and you install it, and then it copies your config from one location to the other location. So your config will be in two places simultaneously for a short while, and then you'll edit settings.php and then switch it to the database, and then it will already be in the database then, and then you can delete the files. So it's like it's kind of a three-step process. Install the
A
module,
migration.
convert the
Yeah.
config, delete the old config.
Migration to whatever you want to call it.
So if I were installing a new site today, is there something in the UI that pops up during installation about this? No, I have to know that I want to do this in advance.
Yep.
And I change the settings.php before I run install?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So I think at this point, like the kind of almost hidden nature of it is kind of fine for starters. We even were talking about having it be, like not encouraged or experimental before we got the tests passing, but we actually did end up getting all of the test coverage passing. And so we're feeling really pretty confident that database driven config is stable. But at the same time, maybe we don't want to rush and tell everybody to start using it.
Right.
I'm wondering at which stage, like of the bootstrap and the installation, maybe only during the installer, there could be an option, but I'm not sure how soon or late in the process it is, like to have the installer write that option in settings. But it's the same. It's similar to how we have hidden the step that selects installation profiles, but you can manually, if you have installation profiles, sort of like trigger that step and select that installation profile. So yeah, anyway.
Yeah, it's a sort of thing where, after all the work that we've done to streamline the installer, I don't think that we want to add another step to the installer. So I think we'll continue to choose the most likely scenario and not show an option during the installer.
So is there an open core issue for this module that Joseph's looking at, or is that, are we thinking a contrib module?
Yeah,
Currently, it's not even in contrib right now. I think it's just
Well, I
custom.
understand, but it's the thought
Eventually,
that I'm asking, is there a core issue, or is the thought that this would eventually be contrib, so we don't need a core issue?
I don't think that we have one.
Yeah, I think we'll see how how feasible it is. I would probably be in favor of having it be in core once we actually can demonstrate its usefulness.
Okay.
I kind of imagine it might be something similar to the UTF-8 multi-byte upgrade, you know, where it's like there's a thing on the status report or something like that, and it's like you can do this thing, but it's like, you know, it walks you through like a wizard sort of situation where it kind of makes clear the seriousness of it. Yeah, I think that would probably be the most likely way to go. It would also be beneficial if we made it like a B command for it, you know, so it could be done from the command line. But again, like, you know, how accessible is that to a normal person? But how accessible does it need to be to a normal person? You know, it's like
Well-
you're talking, if you care about how you deploy and back up your site, you know, maybe you're going to be a more, you know, DevOps oriented kind of person.
Well, there
Right.
is a use case scenario. It's like if you happen to install your site in one of those hosts that have the slower file systems, and you decide that, oh, okay, this is slower than I expected, but I'll deal with that later. I'm building my site, and then you reach a point where you need to switch now just to try if that will fix things because you just discovered that this is a thing. Then instead of asking the person to go and install Backdrop from the scratch again, yeah, at that point where they've put effort on the site, it would be useful to have a tool to switch.
I just want to interject that, yeah, I've been thinking of this as a sort of a power user feature, but Nate, when you were describing it, you talked about the fact that some people don't understand that when they back up their database, they're not backing up their config, and this would help that. And I'm like, well, that's not a power user, right? Power
Right.
users understand that difference. So if those are the people we're intending to help, then maybe we need something that, exposes it a bit so they understand they can make that choice.
Yeah, it's a really good question about like what is more beneficial to our basic user, you know, like putting it in the database matches people's expectations about where configuration is stored. But putting it in the file system exposes a level of clarity about the way that Backdrop functions that is really useful, I think, to users to understand how Backdrop functions. And there's also something about just the accessibility of the active config being in files that I think is beneficial to regular users. So
It also
yeah,
depends.
yeah.
If you
I've-
have
I-
your config version controlled, that matters as well. And power users would not have that. And also the use case that you said of the config directory being outside the doc root, that's another advanced thing. Like most use cases of people that are just using the installer will have the config files within their file system. So when they back up their code base, they back up their configuration. So it's not a problem. They still back up two things: database and code base. That's it. Where things reside is another thing.
Yep. Well, let's move on from that because we've got a lot of other topics to discuss yet today. I'm going to share my screen to show the next set of stuff because there's a lot of really fun things to demonstrate. All right, so this is a fresh Backdrop install, and the thing that you can see right out of the box here is that the admin bar is slightly different than it had been before. I know it looks pretty much the same, but there's a big difference in that all of these icons up here are now using SVGs instead of PNGs. That itself doesn't sound like that big of an achievement, but it's underpinned by an entirely new icon system that includes a very large set of system-wide available icons. We do not have a browser yet to find the icons that are in the system, and this has been raised a couple of times as being an issue, but the icons that we're using are this Phosphor icon set. You can get it from or see them at phosphoricons.com. And we have included the entire icon set here, which is over 1,500 icons in the regular icon set. And then we've also included the entire filled version of the icon set. So there's 3,000 available icons now in Backdrop and a new API underpinning it to make them all accessible and overwritable. So the admin bar icons up here are using a small subset of the available icons from the new icon set, as well as the dashboard. All of these icons are driven from the icon set, and these landing pages here, the admin/config landing page, or anywhere there's actually one of these little admin panels, it can use icons now as well. So I think this is a huge new feature. It's also been fun watching the community in the past week start to try to use it because it's one of the first like major new APIs we've had in a while that is a totally new just in backdrop thing. And so it's been fun to watch people learn the new system.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
I was just gonna say, for an example, I guess would be some of the social media modules.
Yep.
I think
Yeah,
Jen is trying to implement it on the web module, is that right?
Yep, that's right. Yeah. So as these get bigger, one of the nice things is that SVGs fully scale. And so you can see how nice and sharp these look at any size. The font, the admin bar font also got bumped 1 pixel size. It was 11 pixels, and now it's 12. I think that's a pretty minor change in the size so far. I have an inclination to suggest that we increase it further, or perhaps make an option for it. It is nice that as part of this, we did convert everything over to M's. So if we wanted to like increase this font, the entire admin bar from 12 pixels to say like 16 pixels, we could do that. And sorry, this takes a second because it doesn't react to the modification of the CSS. But anyway, the JavaScript triggers there. And so now this is like at 16 pixels. But a consequence of this would be the more tasks thing would be collapsed almost all the time, unless you were on a large screen. But I don't know. It's the sort of thing. It's like, I'll open an issue about it and we can talk about whether or not we think that's a desirable outcome. Let's see. I wonder how much else I should say about the icon system. I don't think that much else needs to be said. The doc site is up to date. So you can look at the new functions. Icon is literally the name of the function that prints icons. This is a good place to start to look into how the functionality works. If you're adding new things to the admin menu, hook menu has now been updated. The hook menu now includes, hook menu's documentation is a little bit crazy. Search in here. It should be updated to include an icon as one of the paths. I'm not quite sure why this isn't updated. It should be. Because I know it's in the code. There might be something with the doc site that is not updated. Well, anyway, there's more documentation to be done about the icon system. I think at the very least we'll need a new set of documentation pages to go over it, and maybe a blog post. Let's see here. Okay.
Nate,
Yep.
So just 2 questions. Where do we document that as a follow-up issue? Like,
In the
would that be a
good question.
backdrop.org issue?
Yeah, I think actually the doc site has its
Or the
own
docs?
Yes.
it has its own repository. I think that's where it should go.
Okay. And the other thing for whoever has to do the blog post. So just to repeat back what I understand is that this affects most people, visitors and site architects and editors, just by implementing the icons in the UI. But there is no UI for using them right now, right? It is primarily this will affect module developers or themers who now have a means of accessing this library.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Just,
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah. The only place in the UI where this would be obvious to expose would be in the menu system, that we could add a field to custom menu links to add icons to them. But because, you know, menu links like this don't display icons normally, you know, what would be the value in registering an icon if it's not getting displayed, because it's dependent on the front end. So there's other questions there about, you know, how much we want to add there. There's also, I mentioned already, there's no icon browser yet. And going to phosphoricons.com is one way of kind of just finding the icons you're looking for. I find that their search is nice because it also has some kind of tagging thing going on. But other than that, you also can just look in your backdrop installation under core, MISC, icons, and there we go. So, you know, most operating systems will render a preview of the things. And then if you want to find something, you can use your search.
Sure. Maybe this is a discussion for another day. And I realize that there's a lot of things in Backdrop that are not obvious from the UI that are available to themers. But I'm just wondering if there isn't something we can do in the UI to let folks know that this change has happened, right?
We have a couple of follow-up issues. One
You
of
know
them
what?
said
Okay, actually, it might be as simple as this, which is you mentioned a blog post, and I'm like, well, a lot of people won't find a blog post, but if we had a blog post, we could do a dashboard announcement that sort of pointed them at the blog post, and that would be some way. The other, I mean, there is an open issue, a very old open issue that, like, after updates, we have some sort of a summary screen that says, here are the new features in your update. And you know, if we had that, that would be a way of doing it. But I think the Backdrop news could suffice in that we could announce it there if we had something to point to.
one use case, and we have a couple of issues, follow-up issues for it, is that what people see now in the screens is the full set of options in the admin bar, which is what administrators see. Content editors see a reduced thing. They just see the content menu. They don't see the necessarily the dashboard. They see a reduced set. And site builders usually place for content editors place shortcuts in there, and those shortcuts will not by default have they will have a default icon. And if you have multiple, they all have the same icon. So there is an issue that we filed to sort of like allow people to customize the first level items in the admin bar when they're custom. So if you have created custom menus, shortcuts for your site, for your content editor specifically, you might need that.
Yeah, but not implemented yet.
Yes, that's a follow-up issue. Yeah. And we have not even decided yet, I should say, that we're gonna do it or not. Yeah.
Yeah, so exciting things, just that we've started using SVGs in Backdrop, that there's an underpinning icon system, and that there's new icons in 3 places, and the admin bar got a little tiny refresh, are all exciting features in 128. 128 also is likely to shape up or kind of be known as, quote, the SVG release, because we included not only the icon set and the icon API and started using SVGs in several places in core, we also added system support for uploading SVGs. So an image field can now accept SVGs. Let's see here. I will just upload one of the icons since we happen to have it here. There we go. There we go. Oh, I think I confused it.
Yeah, you've done it twice in 2
Oh,
ways.
geez. Oh, you know what's actually happened here? This is my bad. I've got Xdebug on and a breakpoint. That's why it's that's why it's hung up. I'm like, what's going on here? Okay, there we go. There we go. So yeah, so this is an SVG that's been uploaded into an image field. You save, and then it's displayed on the front end. The functionality of how this interacts with image styles is pretty interesting. If you go over to your image styles, I think that this is being displayed as a large image right now. And so like, let's go over to, actually, hang on, let's go over to structure, content types, post, and take this image field. Okay, so it's being displayed as large, but then if I say I want this to display as medium instead, and save this, and then reload this, it goes down, it does obey the sizing set by an image style. This is pulled from, well, more or less pulled from the way that the SVG image module worked, both in Drupal 7, actually, and Drupal 10, and in Backdrop, that it listens to the dimensions of the image style, but doesn't actually create a derivative image. So if you look at the source of this image, you can see that it's still pointing at the original airplane SVG file. It didn't create a, image styles large derivative image because it doesn't need to for an SVG. An SVG can be displayed at any size, so it doesn't need to recreate different versions at different sizes because the one image can be displayed at all sizes. There's other caveats here, though, that because derivatives aren't created, some things like the, styles for rotate or grayscale or something like that don't apply to SVG images. So it's excellent in that it works the way that you expect it to for scaling images. But because the entire image system in Olive Backdrop is meant for raster sized images, pixel based images and not vector based ones, it doesn't have the ability to do those grayscale and other kinds of manipulations that are modifying a raster image. But I'm really happy with the way that this has been implemented, and it just works the way that I would like it to. And I think SVG's becoming so commonplace on the web. This is a really great feature expansion. I'm almost waiting just for Tim to ask his questions about this one.
Well, you've done a good job because I don't have any. I mean, you've explained the UI for it pretty good, so that's great.
Excellent. Okay. Let's see
Yeah,
here.
one thing that we should mention is that it is a special case for image styles because the underlying PHP and operating system libraries that manipulate images cannot work on SVGs. So certain things cannot be done. So SVGs are basically code, they're markup. So we could implement the resizing, or I guess things like rotate and things like that we could implement, but certain other things cannot be implemented. And we have a follow-up issue to sort of like denote which image styles apply to SVGs or will not apply if you use an SVG. So yeah.
Yeah. One other note about the way that we're rendering these is we did take a very conservative approach to the embedded mechanism here, that we're using an image tag to display the SVG. And there are other ways to display SVGs inline, in particular using an SVG tag. But we're using the image tag specifically because it has much lower security risk. Embedding an SVG directly onto a page is fraught with all kinds of potential problems because SVGs are HTML or XML. They can contain links, they can contain JavaScript, they can contain CSS. And when they're rendered as an image like this, the browser automatically restricts all of those capabilities of SVGs to make it so that it's only being displayed as an image. So potentially something that may change in the future, you know, like maybe we would have our formatter have an option to display the inline SVG instead, but for now it just displays as an image tag.
And we have some sanitization in place as well.
Yes, and there's on top of that, there's also some checking.
For security, yeah.
Nate, could I share my screen quick? I have an
Uh-huh.
SVG.
While you're sharing, do we have an issue for adding more sanitization?
I
'Cause
still do have a follow-up. I'm
there are
not
a couple tags that we don't actually check for, I think, as yet.
I think that we have a follow-up, at least to abstract the sanitization function so that it can be used by both. I think the icon API and that. I think I'll find an issue. If it's not there, we'll definitely find one.
Okay.
So I quickly shared my screen because Greg brought up the shortcuts feature from Drupal 7, which I have never really used, but was aware of. And I was quickly looking to see if it was still in Backdrop, and it wasn't. We've removed it, but there is a contrib module. I enabled the contrib module, and we've got this little thing going on with the icon, which I don't know if we've run into this before, where it looks like that module was providing an icon, and it looks like the new system is providing the default icon, and they're bumping over each other.
Yeah,
Is that a
we had a-
known issue?
we had a similar issue in core with the little red dot that appears when we show. Yeah, so it was similar to that, but I wasn't referring to the shortcuts. This is a module. Yes, some contrib need to adapt. So what I was referring to is actually editing the administration menu and
Sure.
placing items there via that. But yeah, it's a valid point. Yes, and some
Okay.
contrib that do things like that would have to adapt, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, is there anything we need to do to make people aware of that, or just let people discover it and file bug reports? First, I thought it was intentional, and then I realized, no, that's an SVG from the new system.
It'll be at least in the changelog for sure.
Okay.
Was that the only thing you wanted to show?
Yeah,
Tim?
that was all I wanted.
Okay. All right, we're not done yet. We still have more things. So also we got this report page in which actually, Tim, since you were the one that filed this issue, and Greg, you were the one that worked on it a lot, maybe I'll let you two describe what's going on with this page.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll say quickly and then let Greg, because Greg really took this to the next level. My original request was just that sometimes when we report a bug, people say, well, post a list of your modules in the issue queue. And it was actually kind of hard to do that before because like the modules page, you can't just cut and paste a list of modules. So I had requested a really simple list of modules that were enabled. And then once we started, we realized we could do that with views. And then, but quickly, Greg came up with the idea that we could make it even easier to cut and paste and add additional information. So this is above and beyond what I originally asked for, but I love it. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, so a couple of things there, because my job, my day job in the last 7 to 8 years has been as a support engineer for hosting companies that host Drupal sites. And a common thing is that we have customers raising issues, and then we ask questions like what version of this you're using, or what version of that, and which modules you have enabled. And that was a common pattern with questions being asked in our forum or in our chat. So we needed a way for people to provide this information easily, because you could still get that some of that information in different places in the UI, but it wouldn't be in an easy format. And for any support engineers out there, when they request such information from customers, we have the good customers where they don't just copy and paste all that information in an email. They rather copy that, put it into a text file, and provide it to us. So I was looking sort of like that, providing that to both sides of the thing, to customers or people in the community that want to report bugs, and to the people that are trying to help them, being either professionals because it's their day job, or the rest of the community trying to help people, to have an easy standardized way to, get that information that will help them with troubleshooting. So this is the result of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think this is wonderful. there's a
So-
lot of stuff here too.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's great. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, I may have to open an issue. The shortcut module's been instructive because I just added the site where I added the shortcut module to. It's showing up twice, so I don't know if there's a bug that's causing.
Yeah, actually, I was kind of
Oh,
vaguely
you-
hiding that. There's a little issue that the
Oh.
last item is repeated
Okay,
for some
that's
reason.
why.
I
That's
mentioned
why.
that in the I mentioned that in the follow-up on that. I reopened the issue actually, and I have a few more things that need to be fixed. And one of that is that the last item repeats itself. So it's one of the things that I have as follow-ups to fix in the next couple of weeks.
I had noticed that in my previous testing. So.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, that's it for the big items, I do believe. Let's double check the issue queue here. So there's a lot of items that are still marked open, but they're open because they're marked fixed. They need change records. And so there's a number of items like that that still need just documentation being added. Let's see, and then a closed issue. Fix that bug.
Yeah, maybe it's a good idea to also mention that we sort of like unofficially made a soft policy to be with minor releases, at least if there's no security update, to be updating the CK editor library. And so something new that will come with the release is actually the newer minor version of CK editor 5, which. So what I mean to say is that with its minor release, we might be inheriting features that are added or improvements in the CK editor versions. So yeah, that's that as well.
Yep. I did I haven't read this comment from you, Greg, here.
That's all. Follow-ups.
Yeah. Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong in my statement here then. It looks like updating CK editor to the latest version doesn't really add any notable functionality. At least if we just update it as is, it will pretty much stay the same.
Yep.
Yeah. We have the option of potentially enabling a new plugin, maybe two, that they've started including. But you know, they're not real major items. Yep. Okay, that's it for 128 items that are like major features. I think it's going to be pretty fantastic, the collection of new functionality that we've managed to include. The big items being the swappable config, the icon system and the use of it, uploading SVGs, and then the debug report. So it's nice 4 major features for a nice minor release. All right, let's see. We had another topic that came up. This is an interesting. This is totally separate and from the 128 release, but it's something that came up a couple weeks ago that is a topic worth discussing. And that's has to do with Aegir, the Drupal hosting system that has been around for quite a while. Aegir is a system for managing large deployments of Drupal sites. I think it also can do WordPress sites, and I think already it can do. Oh, actually, it says add backdrop support in Aegir. So I guess maybe it can't do backdrop sites yet, but they're planning on adding backdrop sites as being one of the systems that Aegir can deploy. But the really notable thing about this is that not just the backdrop support in Aegir, but there's a dashboard that controls the deployments of the other sites. And right now that dashboard is written in Drupal 7. And instead of switching to Drupal 10, the Aegir team has decided that they want to use Backdrop as their dashboard software. So this is a pretty exciting development, actually, that I think faced with the same set of circumstances as a lot of Drupal 7 site owners, the authors of Aegir are in a situation where they have basically a custom application built on Drupal 7, and it's way easier and more feasible for them to switch that over to use Backdrop than it is to move to Drupal 10. They wrote up a blog post of sorts. It's, as far as I've seen, only available on this GitHub gist. But they say the plans have already been announced and we are working on them, still investigating the best ways to make it happen. So this little blog post here is a little it's a little pessimistic at points, but you know, because they're basically expressing their frustration with how difficult it is to move on to new Drupal. But you know, for us, this is a very positive thing, and in fact, exactly why we made Backdrop in the first place was for exactly these kinds of situations. Unfortunate that it's always tied with people's frustration of the reality of Drupal. But still, it's exciting news, and this is like in my opinion, this is a big vote of confidence for Backdrop as a platform, that another piece of software is saying we're going to build the foundation of our software on Backdrop. Very exciting.
But also a good way where to sort of like emphasize that Backdrop and Drupal can work together, because they're not moving away from Drupal. Their hosting system will continue to support hosting Backdrop and all versions of Drupal. It's just that the interface is going to be based on Backdrop. So it's sort of like a collaboration of both communities, or a mix of all products of both communities, I guess.
Yeah, it also is exciting in that way, in that let's say you have used Agger in the past and are using Agger currently to manage Drupal 10 sites, right? And so you know that Agger is built on Drupal 7, and you have to use this Drupal 7 based platform to manage your Drupal 10 based sites. When that gets switched over to Backdrop, that will expose a potentially large number of Drupal site administrators to Backdrop as a piece of software. And so now they're going to be seeing Backdrop on a regular basis, even though their primary objective is managing Drupal sites. So it's going to expose Backdrop as like, you know, another system that's out there, and they'll become familiarized with it in the course of managing their Drupal 10 sites. I think that's very exciting.
Yeah, and plus now they get configuration management for that dashboard and all the features that we have added over the 10 years, so that their dashboard and the functionality that it provides has more potential to provide more features out of there. So they get more options. So, and security, because there would have been a need to make a decision by the end of this year, January next year.
Yeah, there's also some other peripheral things related to this, like they Omega 8 CC maintains a Drush 8 fork that supports the latest versions of PHP and the latest versions of Drupal. And so they have an inclination to continue using the Drush Backdrop integration that we provided. We've kind of been moving or shifting and recommending that people use B instead of Drush, because it works better, there's less abstraction, and it has almost all of the same functionality as Drush does. So we've really been pushing Backdrop site users to use B if they get the choice. But the Drush extension, there was some discussion just this week actually about what the future of the Drush integration looks like, and there was an issue filed about like announcing that the Drush extension is not recommended because Drush's end of life is timed the same as the end of life for Drupal 7. And so we went in the Drush project and said, we don't recommend using this project, use B instead, because Drush is going to be marked end of life. This changes things, because Drush looks like it's not reaching end of life. It's kind of the thing here is that at least Omega 8 is planning on maintaining Drush 8 indefinitely at this point. And so it's possible we may want to reconsider, you know, what the future of Drush in Backdrop looks like, if there's going to be an audience that's using it. But it's yet to be determined. This discussion, they're saying we actually only use a few Drush commands, so it's also possible that maybe, you know, the Aegir support for Backdrop would just use B. Like there is a certain aspect here where it's like, you know, surely they don't use Drush to manage their WordPress websites. They probably use WP CLI, right? So I would bet that there's already some abstraction there in place where it's like maybe they'll switch over to using B for Backdrop sites and Drush for Drupal, and the plan will go as continued. But yeah, there's just some things that are in flux here about the future of Drush and Backdrop. All right. Do you guys have any other comments or thoughts on that?
Yeah, we just final thoughts that we mentioned the major features that are getting in, but as usual, there's heaps of user experience and UI improvements that are going in. I think there's a couple of dozen actually. And because we didn't have a really recent bug fix release, all these are going to be inherited. Basically, they're going to be shipped with the 127.2 and inherited by 128, of course. So there's, besides those major features, there's other, as usual, a plethora of smaller fixes.
Yeah, there's 28 closed issues right now in the 127.2 milestone. Yeah, and also looking forward, you mentioned it that you know, the 127.2 release comes out simultaneously as 128. And so 128 will seem like it got even more features because it will also have 127.2's usability improvements. And I'll put out the reminder here that even though feature freeze was yesterday and we're going to be making the 128 preview release today, we still have 2 weeks to not only fix the bugs, but usability improvements, anything that has that UX square brackets in front of the issue, are also still permitted in this 2-week window. So there's actually potentially still more things that are going to get added, probably again to 127.2 and 128. But from here to May 15th, the focus will be on, first of all, fixing any bugs with the new features, but secondly, working through the 127.2 milestone to clean up all of these issues that that got a little bit deprioritized while we were really focused on the 128 features that were affected by feature freeze. So I'm looking at the 127.2 milestone, for example, and at the top of the list here, there's 10 or more. There's 21 issues in the whole milestone, and there's 10 issues that are all needs review and needs testing. So there's a lot of work in flight there that could also potentially be completed in the next couple of weeks. Yep. Well, it's been a very exciting week in the world of Backdrop. I will say that I think this flurry that happened here in the last week is one of the most intense periods of development I think I've seen in Backdrop's history. The fact that, you know, a week ago when we were talking about this, we didn't have any of those 4 features in, and now all of them are completed, plus some other items as well. It was really incredible to see our community come together and just like knocking things back and forth, like minutes between comments or less. The activity in Zulip that corresponded with the activity that we were seeing on GitHub. Everybody really came together and put in a ton of effort to make these new features happen for 128. And also just some of these items have been dragging on for years, over a decade in some cases. And so to see some of these very long-standing issues come to a rapid close is just very exciting and motivating, I think.
And also there's another 1 or 2 at least items that were feature requests that got very close. So these are sort of like piled up for the next release. So we didn't get to finalize them, but they're looking pretty good, like 80% done or something. If I was to put figures on them, referring to the shortcuts for the layouts, the content and content type layouts. So that's pretty close. We were blocked on decisions, so it's we're on a good path for those as well.
Let's just mention that the font icon library was like number 2 or 3 on our wish list, and that got knocked off there, so that's good.
Yeah, I'll throw out some more praise here that I think Backdrop Live is what unblocked that issue. And so having Backdrop Live just a month ago, right before the 128 release, I think was just really excellent timing, that it made it so that there was enough time to get people excited about developing Backdrop, yet close enough to the release that people were like super excited because they were like, oh, we have a deadline. And so just the timing of everything worked out really well. And just, yeah, big thanks again for Backdrop Live and starting the motivation engine, basically.
Yep. Thanks to the entire community and everyone involved. Yeah, it was awesome.
All right. Well, we're at the top of the hour. Thanks again, everybody, for joining these meetings, and to those people that watch them online. As you run across things, reach out to us in Zulip, of course, our chat system, and in GitHub. The 128 preview release is going to be coming out here in the next couple of hours. That doesn't get a lot of wide publicity. It's mostly just a release on GitHub. We don't publish it to backdropcms.org or anything like that. But if you get the opportunity to try it out in the next couple of weeks, please do. And we're going to work to make it an awesome release. So thanks so much, everybody. And